Senator Akpabio is not more of a senator than I am. He's not a governor of this place. And he treated me as if I was his servant or I was a domestic staff in his house. It's very unfortunate that at this time, after so many years of democracy, we would have a National Assembly be run by such dictatorship. I'm actually worried as to what apology they expect from me. You can't apologize for an injustice. And may I remind the good people of Nigeria that the document that led to my illegal suspension, which is the recommendation which Senator Neda Emaswen read, was actually written by the office of the Senate President. And the signatures that endorsed that recommendation were not willful signatures. It was only attendance sheet that was attached. That means the entire document that read and pronounced my suspension was listed with fraud. So if they are expecting me to apologize, I'm sorry, I don't have these words. And if that is the condition for opening this office, then I think we have a long dance to make.
Power, silence, and punishment. At the center of this is Senator Natasha Akpoti, the federal representative of Kogi Central. Her story is one of defiance, one of a woman who dared to speak against the most powerful man in the Senate, and one of a chamber that chose silence over accountability. Suspended, ridiculed, dismissed as a shadow, but Natasha fought back. And now with her return, Nigeria is forced to ask, was her suspension truly about parliamentary discipline? Or was it a carefully crafted tool to silence dissent, protect leadership, and remind opposition voices of their place? This is the story of politics, silence, and dangerous precedent it set for Nigerian democracy. To understand Natasha's fight, we must start with her journey. Natasha Akpoti is not your typical Nigerian politician. She is a lawyer, an activist, and a woman who built her reputation standing up for marginalized communities and confronting entrenched interests. Her election as Senator for Kogi Central in 2023 was historic. In a chamber dominated by men and by ruling APC, Natasha, a PDP senator, stood out after fighting battles in court to reclaim her stolen mandate. She was outspoken, she was unafraid, and she quickly became a thorn in the side of the Senate leadership. Her presence represented more than just one vote in the red chamber. She symbolized the possibility of re-opposition, a female voice in a male-dominated space, and a critical voice in a chamber that often rewards silence. But being outspoken in Nigerian politics comes with a cost, especially when your voice questions the wrong people, especially when you stand across the Senate President himself. And that clash was coming, and it came faster than anyone expected.
The petition is in my name against the President of the Nigerian Senate, His Excellency Senator Godswill Akpabio, for sexual harassment, abuse of office, and malicious obstruction of my legislative functions. You may recall, sir, that on Friday in Arise TV, I did make some statements, and I have decided to narrow these statements in a formal petition against the President of this Senate.
It began with an allegation, a deeply personal, deeply serious allegation. Natasha Akpoti accused Senate President Godswill Akpabio of sexual harassment. The details shocked Nigerians. A senator public saying that she had been harassed by the highest ranking officer in the chamber. It was a moment that could have reshaped the conversation around gender, power, and accountability in Nigeria's legislature. But instead of transparency came retaliation. The Senate leadership did not launch a credible investigation. They did not seek an independent inquiry. They did not allow the matter to be properly aired. Instead, Natasha found herself under attack Her allegations were dismissed as disruptive. Her presence became framed as conduct unbecoming, and suddenly the accuser became the accused. The Senate Ethics and Privilege Committee turned its gaze on Natasha. The result is suspension. Not for days, not for weeks, but for long 6 months. It was a move that many saw not as discipline, but as revenge. The message was clear. Challenge the leadership and you will pay. Raise uncomfortable truths and you will be silenced. And so, the chamber that should have stood for accountability instead stood for silence, as alleged.
To unseal Senator Natasha Akpoti's office, I, Alabi, the Deputy Director, Sergeant at Arms, hereby unseal the office. The office is hereby unsealed.
6 months. That was the price Natasha paid. But she was not the first, and she may never be the last. Because in Nigerian Senate, suspension has long been a political weapon. Senator Alindume was suspended for 6 months after he called for investigation into the then Senate President Bukola Saraki and Senator Dino Melaye, his crime, asking questions that embarrassed leadership. Dino Melaye himself faced a similar fate when his clashes with the APC establishment grew too loud. He became the target of disciplinary measures designed not to correct misconduct but to weaken an opponent. The pattern is clear. Suspension is not always about discipline, it is often about control. And in Natasha's case, it was about making an example. Her constituents in Kogi Central, hundreds of thousands of Nigerians, lost their voice in the Senate for half a year. Not because their senator broke the law, not because she was corrupt, but because she dared to confront power. This is where the danger lies. Suspension as punishment is not just about one senator. It becomes collective punishment of voters, a way to silence entire communities by silencing their representative. And so, Natasha's case raises the bigger question: who does the Senate really serve? The people or the politics of its leaders?
Court only gave an opinion, an obiter dictum, what we call an obiter dictum, that the Senate should consider recalling her back. Although the reliefs are not stated, there's no question asking for suspension to be lifted because it occurred prior to the suspension. So it was more or less an obiter that she was of the view, my lord was of the view that the suspension was excessive.
On the other issue, where the judgment is that the Senate should recall her, how does that work? The Senate has done something that is illegal. The Senate has done something that is against the law and the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. What the judge needed to do is to say that they have done the wrong thing and tell her to resume.
Natasha did not take a suspension lying down. She went to court, and in a landmark ruling, the Federal High Court declared her suspension excessive, unconstitutional, and a violation of her constituent right to representation. The judgment was clear. The Senate had overreached. Discipline was one thing, but depriving a constituency of representation for 6 months was unlawful. It could have ended there, but in Nigerian's politics, nothing ends so simply. The Senate rejected the court's intervention. They argued that legislature autonomy gave them the right to suspend their member as they saw fit. They accused Natasha of skit-making when she attempted to return. They insisted that no court could force their hand in lifting a suspension, and so began a constitutional showdown. The judiciary defending the people's right to representation, the legislature defending its autonomy to police itself. But beneath the legal argument lay the political truth. This was not about procedure, it was about power. If Natasha could return simply because a court said so, what precedent would that set? If courts could overturn suspensions, then leadership would lose its powerful weapon for silencing dissenting voices. And so, the standoff continued. A clash not just between a senator and her chamber, but between the two arms of government. And the people, once again, were caught in the middle of it all. At its core, Natasha's battle is not just personal. It is a test of Nigerian's democracy itself. First, there is the gender angle. Was Natasha punished more harshly because she is a woman? Would a male senator have been treated with the same severity for making such an allegation in a chamber where women are scarce? Her suspension sends a chilling message. Speak out and you risk not just ridicule but removal. Second, there is the opposition angle. Natasha is PDP. The Senate leadership is APC. Her suspension fits a pattern where opposition voices are marginalized to maintain control, and the chamber becomes less a house of debate and more of a fortress of conformity. Third, there is the democratic angle. Suspensions, when abused, do not just silence individuals. They silence the people who elected them. They strip communities of their voice. They weaken the very foundation of representative democracy. Because if lawmakers fear suspension, who will dare to speak truth to power? If raising allegations against leadership leads to banishment, who will hold leadership accountable? Natasha's return, therefore, is not just about her seat. It is about whether Nigerian Senate can be a space of free debate or whether it has become a space of enforced silence. And so, Natasha Akpoti has returned to the Senate, but the scars of her suspension remain. Her case is a mirror held up to Nigerian politics, a mirror that shows a chamber where power protects itself, where discipline becomes punishment, and punishment becomes silencing. It raises the question that every Nigerian must now confront. Is our Senate truly serving the people, or has it become a place where truth is inconvenient, dissent is dangerous, and silence is rewarded? For Natasha, the fight continues, and for her constituents, the hope is that their voice will no longer be denied. And for Nigerians, the challenge remains: can democracy survive if its lawmakers cannot speak freely? Because, in the end, a democracy without dissenting voices is not a democracy at all. At this point in this video, we ask, what do you think? Was Natasha's suspension a matter of discipline or a deliberate strategy to silence the voice that the Senate could not control? And if the Senate can silence one senator for 6 months, what does that mean for the rest of us? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this video, share it widely, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dive into Nigerian's political drama. Because in the weeks ahead, we will continue to ask the questions that those in power hope you never asked.